I had exactly $14,280 left in the business account, a stitched incision still healing across my abdomen, and a white pharmacy envelope folded inside my jacket pocket that I had not shown anyone yet. My son was asleep under a heated hospital blanket on the 6th floor of Mercy Riverside in Columbus, and my mother-in-law was downstairs telling people in the family waiting room that I was not handling this well. She said it in that soft, sorrowful voice people use when they want an audience to do the judging for them. 2 days later, a judge would sign an emergency protective order with her name on it. But that night, all I had was a 7-year-old boy with unexplained collapses, a retired nurse who was always present before each one, and a feeling I recognized from my years as a Navy corpsman. The danger wasn't coming fast. It was coming familiar. Let me take you back. My name is Evan Mercer. I was 34 then, living just outside Columbus, Ohio, with my wife Lila and our son Theo. After leaving the military, I started a small medical records review firm with an old service friend. We worked for plaintiff attorneys, insurers, sometimes hospitals, building timelines out of things other people overlooked, medication gaps, altered chart notes, missing signatures. Boring work, most people would say. I liked it because facts stayed where you put them. Theo was the opposite of boring. He collected weather facts, hated mashed potatoes, and believed octopuses should be considered honorary aliens. He was also, until that winter, almost never sick. Lila taught music at a public elementary school. She was kind in the way that makes other people speak more gently around her. Her mother, Denise Holloway, had raised her alone and never let anyone forget what that had cost her. Denise had worked 19 years as a pediatric nurse before retiring early with a back injury and a church full of people who still called her Miss D. She wore pearl studs, sent handwritten thank you cards, and treated me with the polished patience of someone enduring a guest who had overstayed. The first collapse happened 3 weeks after my surgery. I had torn something badly enough lifting archived file boxes and ended up with an emergency abdominal repair. I was home, slow-moving, sore, not allowed to drive for 10 days. Denise stepped in before anyone asked. She brought soup, herbal tonics, little glass droppers from a clean wellness company she said she trusted more than modern medicine. Theo had a fainting episode at school on a Thursday. He vomited that night. By Saturday, he was in the ER with severe dehydration and erratic blood pressure. Then he improved. Then it happened again. And again. Every specialist had a theory. Viral inflammation, endocrine irregularity, a strange allergy. They tested his blood, scanned his abdomen, checked his heart, watched his oxygen, adjusted fluids, and still nothing held. He would worsen suddenly, then stabilize just long enough to send everyone back to the beginning. By the third admission, Theo had lost weight, Lila had stopped sleeping properly, and I had made the worst mistake of my marriage. I started acting like an investigator before I acted like a husband. Lila caught me one night building a spreadsheet at the kitchen table. "What are you doing?" "Looking for a pattern." She stared at the columns: symptoms, timing, meals, visitors, supplements, vitals. "You think I missed something?" "No. That is not what this looks like, Evan." She was crying by then, exhausted enough to speak quietly. That was always worse. I put the laptop lid down. But the truth was, I had already seen one thing I could not unsee. Theo's longest healthy stretch in 10 months had been the 2 weeks Denise spent in Arizona for a church women's retreat. At the time, I had called it luck. Looking back, it didn't feel like luck. The dehumanization in that family had never been loud. Denise preferred cleaner cuts. The first was at our rehearsal dinner when she touched my sleeve and said to a table full of relatives, "Lila always did have a soft spot for strays." Everyone laughed because she did. So did I, eventually. The second came after Theo was born, when I suggested we limit visitors for the first week. Denise smiled and said, "You can make rules about furniture placement, sweetheart, not blood." She walked past me and took my son from the nurse before I did. At Mercy Riverside, the person who changed everything was not Theo's doctor. It was a night-charge nurse named Tessa Velez. She was in her late 50s, compact, unsmiling, with the habit of standing very still before she spoke. At 11:40 on a Wednesday night, she asked if I would step into the supply alcove. No dramatic pause, no lowering of lights, just fluorescent hum and the smell of disinfectant. She said, "I have been doing pediatric step-down for 28 years. Your son's symptom pattern doesn't behave like a disease. It behaves like an event." I said nothing. She continued, "I cannot accuse anyone based on instinct, but I can tell you this. Do not let anyone give him anything that does not come through staff. Not water, not candy, not natural supplements, nothing." My whole body went cold in one clean wave. Why are you telling me this? Because I watched his chart, and because I watched who touches his tray. Then she looked at me for a second longer and added, "If you miss this, you lose everything." That line stayed with me. I went back into Theo's room and sat beside his bed until after midnight. Lila had finally gone home to shower. Denise arrived at 12:18 a.m. with a tote bag, a devotional booklet, and the exact expression of tender concern she wore in public. She stopped when she saw me still there. "Oh, Evan, you look awful. Go home. I'll sit with him." "I'm staying." She gave me a long, sympathetic look, the kind designed to make refusal seem cruel. "You can't control every crisis." Behind her, Tessa appeared in the hallway, holding a clipboard she did not need. Denise noticed her. Something subtle changed around Denise's mouth. "I brought Theo his mineral drops," Denise said. Lila asked. "She didn't." Denise's fingers tightened once around the tote strap. "Set the bag down," I said. She hesitated. Just enough. I had seen that hesitation before, in depositions and interviews, and the half-second before somebody decides whether to lie badly or well. "Denise," I said, "set the bag down." She did. Inside was a children's puzzle book, a cardigan, and a white pharmacy envelope with no retail logo. Folded shut. My name was not on it. Theo's was not on it. Inside were 2 amber syringes without needles and a printed label peeled halfway off a small vial. Tessa took one look and called hospital security. Denise didn't panic. That was the worst part. She just inhaled softly and said, "You are making an enormous mistake." I remember holding that envelope very carefully, like it might explain my life if I didn't crush it first. My business partner, Nolan Price, came in before dawn. Officially, he handled digital case architecture for our firm. Unofficially, he was the calmest person I knew. He took custody photos, logged the chain of possession, and pulled metadata from the hospital room tablet after I told him something else Tessa had noticed. The pediatric camera above Theo's bed had briefly gone offline during 2 of the prior overnight incidents. That should not have happened. By 8 a.m., Nolan had something ugly. The room camera had not failed. It had been manually disconnected for 90-second intervals, twice, by someone who knew exactly where the maintenance panel sat. Badge logs showed no staff entry during one of those intervals. Visitor logs showed Denise had signed in both nights. The second folder changed everything. It was not in the tote. It came from Detective Aria Benson in the Special Victims Unit after Hospital Counsel got involved, and the subpoena process moved faster than I expected. Benson had the kind of quiet authority that makes everyone else stop decorating their sentences. In that folder were Denise's recent purchases from a small wellness distributor, a telehealth consultation under a church friend's name, and an order history for compounded fludrocortisone microdoses and a concentrated emetic tincture. Nothing packaged to look overtly criminal. Everything precise enough to make a child intermittently ill if administered carefully. Nolan also found deleted text fragments recovered from Denise's tablet backup after a lawful warrant. One was to a friend from church. Lila only really stays close when Theo needs help. Then she remembers who never left her. Another read, "If they move to Cleveland, I lose them both." That was the motive. Not money, not hatred in the usual sense, possession. When Lila arrived and I laid the evidence out, I did it the only way I knew how. Calmly, in order, no speeches. The envelope, the badge gaps, the camera disconnect logs, the purchases, the messages. Lila sat at the edge of the hospital chair, one hand over her mouth. I watched grief move across her face in stages, almost like weather crossing land. "She said the drops were for immunity," she whispered. "I know. I gave them to him." "You didn't know." Her shoulders folded then, not dramatic, just total. It is a terrible thing to watch someone understand that love was used as a delivery system. By noon, Detective Benson had enough for an arrest and enough for a temporary no-contact order pending charges. Denise was taken into custody from the church parking lot after a women's luncheon. Even then, she remained composed. She told officers there had been a misunderstanding. She asked whether Lila was present. She asked whether Theo had eaten lunch. That evening she posted bond, and that was when the real pressure began. Number 2. Most people think the arrest is the climax. It usually isn't. The real danger comes after, when the person who has lived by narrative realizes the facts have turned against them and starts fighting for the story. Denise started with voicemails, then emails, then a message sent through Lila's aunt saying, "Your mother is old and humiliated and needs you to come get ahead of this before strangers define her." She knew exactly which words would land. Old, humiliated, mother, strangers. Lila sat on the laundry room floor one night, listening to the fourth voicemail. "I did not argue with her. I did not call Denise names. I did not say, 'I told you so,' because that sentence has never saved a marriage. I just handed Lila my phone." On it was a newly recovered audio file Nolan had pulled from Denise's synced tablet cache. Denise had recorded notes to herself, a habit, apparently. In one of them she said in an almost conversational tone, "The school nurse got worried after the second episode. Need to space them out more, nothing too obvious." Lila listened once, then again, and after the second time she set my phone face down. "I'll testify," she said. Denise's attorney tried the obvious approach first. He called me controlling. He suggested I had used my profession to turn coincidence into a theory. He implied my post-surgical pain medication had made me paranoid. He hinted that Mercy Riverside had rushed to blame a family member to cover diagnostic failures. That might have worked if we had only had one type of evidence. We didn't. We had chemical analysis explained by a pediatric toxicologist. We had access records explained by hospital security. We had digital metadata explained by Nolan. We had Denise's own recordings. We had Tessa Velez. The ally twist came there. Tessa was not just a veteran nurse. She had spent 6 years on a state child fatality review panel. She knew exactly how caregiver-induced illness cases hide inside ordinary family devotion. When she testified, she did not overreach. She explained patterns, timing, control of intake, symptom interruption when access narrows. That restraint made her devastating. Still, Denise had one last plan. 3 weeks before the hearing on the long-term protective order and criminal case scheduling, she accepted an award at a hospital foundation gala for community service in pediatric wellness. I remember laughing once without humor when I saw the announcement. Mercy's development office had not yet caught up with the criminal file, and Denise had leveraged old nursing connections to get herself back into public sympathy before the full story spread. That gala became the public set piece. Not because I wanted spectacle, because Denise wanted witnesses. She thought the room would protect her. It was held in a restored downtown hotel ballroom, all amber lighting and donor tables, and people who wore kindness like a polished accessory. Lila and I attended with Sonia Bell, the assistant county prosecutor, because Denise's lawyer had spent the week implying the state had no appetite for trial. Sonia had, quietly, thoroughly. Denise took the stage just after dessert, thanked the foundation, and spoke about the sacred work of protecting children. A few people even stood. Then Mercy's general counsel, who had arrived late and been handed updated records 30 minutes earlier, walked to the side of the stage and spoke to the MC. The screens behind Denise changed, not to anything theatrical, just to a slide prepared for court, clean and plain, a timeline, hospitalizations, visitor logs, chemical findings, camera disconnects, recovered note excerpts. People stopped moving. Denise turned and saw it over her own shoulder. That was the first reveal. The bigger one came when Sonia rose and informed the room that due to the evidence trail, the state had filed an expanded motion that afternoon seeking stricter release conditions and a no-contact extension covering both Theo and Lila. The room did not gasp. Real rooms rarely do. It just went very still. The nuclear moment belonged to Lila. She stood up, not shaking, and said into the sudden silence, "My mother used my son's body to keep control over my life. I will not help her do it again." No one clapped. Thank God for that. It would have cheapened it. The MC looked ill. Denise looked for the first time genuinely alone. This isn't revenge. This is justice. I did not say that at the gala. I said it later, in the courthouse hallway, when Nolan asked if I was all right. The courtroom went silent a month later for a different reason. Denise took the stand against counsel's advice. People like her usually do eventually. They think composure is evidence. Under direct examination, she sounded wounded, maternal, misread. Under cross-examination, Sonia Bell did not attack. She organized. She walked Denise through pediatric dosage knowledge, then prior nursing experience, then the wellness purchases, then the badge entries, then the maintenance panel location, then the voice memo. Need to space them out more. Then the message, if they move to Cleveland, I lose them both. And finally, the question that ended the case in any moral sense, long before verdict. Mrs. Holloway, when your grandson got better during periods when you had no access to him, was that also a misunderstanding? Denise did not answer right away. For 1 second, maybe 2, the performance dropped. That was enough. She was convicted on multiple counts, including felony child endangerment, poisoning, tampering with evidence, and unlawful interference with medical care. The judge imposed a prison sentence, mandatory psychiatric treatment, and a permanent no-contact order. He also granted the state's request to bar any future unsupervised access to minors if she were ever released. His language was restrained. That made it heavier. He said, "This court has rarely seen care weaponized with such calculation." Theo recovered fully. That line matters more than any sentencing detail. Children are not symbols. They are children. He gained weight. He went back to school. He became briefly obsessed with tornado documentaries and insisted our goldfish needed a storm readiness plan. Lila and I did not glide nobly into healing. We went to counseling. We had hard weeks. We sat through ugly quiet. Trust is not damaged only by betrayal. Sometimes it is damaged by the different speeds at which two people recognize it. But she had stood up in that ballroom, then in court, then at home. Courage counts even when it arrives late. 1 year later, the business account had more than $14,280 in it. We had moved to a smaller but brighter house near Bexley. Theo was 8 and campaigning for a bearded dragon. Lila had started composing little piano pieces again after dinner. I still checked locks twice some nights. I still woke up too fast when I heard vomiting, even if it was only the dog next door. Healing has manners, but it does not have speed. I went back to Mercy Riverside once, not for closure exactly. I found Tessa Velez at the nurse's station and told her Theo was healthy. She nodded like she had expected nothing less. Then I walked outside into cold Ohio light and stood there for a minute longer than necessary. There are people who confuse boundaries with cruelty because boundaries finally stop their access. There are people who call control love because love sounds cleaner. There are people who can make harm look like help for a very long time. Do not argue with what patterns are trying to tell you. Do not surrender your judgment to familiarity. And when the truth finally shows its face, do not look away just because that face belongs to family. If this story held you, tell me in the comments, at what moment would you have known Denise was dangerous? And subscribe if you want more original legal revenge stories where the loudest victory is usually the quietest one.